This video is sponsored by Hobday&Hicks. What's this? A range of models accompanied by a paint guide that looks like it could be from the 1980s? Well, join me as I use the new Blanche paints on some very beautiful yet nostalgic looking models from the new Barons War supplement, Warhost. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. So what is Warhost? Well, Warhost is a supplement to the game Barons War. Now, you may be familiar with Barons War. If you're not, that came into being probably in the 2020s during the COVID period. Andy Hobday, its creator, decided I want to play some games where I get to get medieval knights, fighting against medieval knights and stabbing lots of stuff in a nice skirmish format. And I want that because I like playing Cry Havoc. So he made that. It was very successful. And people were like, Andy, you should probably do a fantasy version because it's quite good. And he was like, okay, maybe I should. And that is what this is. This is the creation of those early days of like going, yeah, maybe I should do a fantasy version. So what makes it different to other fantasy games? Well, that is something Andy does mention in his introduction in the rulebook. It's like, how do you do that? How do you make that successful? It's quite hard. It's quite a stretch to make a new fantasy setting with it looking new and unique. And me being me, I am a huge fan of generic fantasy. Always have been, always will be. I like sword and sorcery. I like me wizards. I like me dwarves. I like me elves. I like me orcs. Well, I don't like painting orcs, but I like orcs. So how is this any different? Well, it is and it isn't. So to me, when I see Warhost, I see Tolkien-esque and old school Warhammer, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because that's missing in my life now. You don't get to see many of that these days. Yes, you can get the Tolkien-esque stuff, but not the old school 1980s, early 90s Tolkien-esque stuff. And that's what I think this kind of fulfills, or at least scratches a bit of that itch for me, certainly. Now, one thing Andy does state is in the introduction that it is still in its early days. He's not quite nailed down the setting. I still think it has its own unique look and identity. But, you know, as years go on, things develop and get better. That's what happens. I mean, you make a cool rule set and you just add to it. And I think this is the early days of that, and getting to see where it is now and where it will go will be quite an exciting and fun journey. But I'm going to talk about why I do think they are their own unique thing to a certain degree. Because yes, you can look at them at a glance and go, yeah, it's Tolkien elves, it's Tolkien dwarves, it's Tolkien orcs. But I look at those and I go, they look like they could fit into real life, like Dark Age, late Roman period, Arthurian legends. The orcs obviously were very akin to how I would always want orcs to look, and I don't want that to change because that's what I want my orcs to look like. So that is a big tick for me. They've not messed around with the orcs. The orcs look like orcs should look, but the humans, the elves, the dwarfs, kind of feel like they could fit into the Dark Ages because you look at the armour and you look at the style of weaponry and how they're adorned and this, that and the other, and the kind of banners that they're using. Does feel a lot like that. So big fan of that. Now, Paul Hicks, the sculptor of all the stuff for Warhost and Barons War in general, has probably sculpted every period possible. So he's got quite a knowledge when it comes to historical uniforms and accuracy, and you can see that in a lot of the sculpts as well. But yeah, that Paul Hicks is quite a talented guy, as is Andy when it comes to writing rules. Now, at the time of filming, so depending on when you're watching this, it could be like 10 years in the future, don't know. There was a handful of forces available. So you got the orcs and the elves, which are pretty much nailed down with sculpting and being produced. But the dwarves, the humans, and the other faction, which I'll come to in a bit, haven't quite been made yet. So, but they do have all the factions in the book and all the rules for them, and obviously some very pretty art. That's something as well. I'm a big fan of art in books. I like looking at pretty pictures. I like looking at pretty photos too, because they look cool. But when I was looking at all through the art here, you've got like a sense of like that, I was saying that kind of Dark Age kind of feel, but it's all done by Peter Dennis, who's an amazing artist. So it's really nice just seeing all the imagery, and it's very sort of like gets your creative juices going when you look at like how they've sort of approached the color schemes and what kind of colors they've used for like the elves or the humans or the dwarfs or whatever. So I kind of like seeing that influence, but also I like to put my own stamp on it as well. But speaking of the factions, I'm going to go through each of them, and I'll start with the orcs first. Now the orcs, like I said a minute ago, are very much Tolkien-esque orcs. They've got what I need. They've got mail shirts, they've got tatty looking clothes, they've got tatty looking weapons, they've got those silly little bowl helmets, and they just look ugly. That's an orc. That's what I want for my orcs. You obviously can make whatever colour tribe you want to. I don't think they have like nailed down all the tribe names yet or anything like that, but they've got some cool pictures of banners and stuff, so you can just pick one of those. I decided to go for a red colour scheme in mine. Maybe that's probably like Mordor in the back of my brain, just scratching away going, do him red, Peach, do him red. And I'm like, okay, I'll do him red. But I kind of like red and silvers, and it just makes him look a bit evil. It's dark red though, so it makes him look even more evil. But yes, these guys look great. They what I want for my orcs, as I've already stated multiple times. So yeah, if you're a fan of orcs, and especially old school nostalgic, and that's the thing as well, is like the colour palette and the style of sculpting and the aesthetic does make me feel like it's like the 80s, early 90s kind of style orcs. So very excited by those. Next up is my favourite faction so far. I know you're going to say, Peach, you love dwarves. I do, but they're not ready yet, and I want to wait. I'm going to wait. Because, you know, like when you're having a Sunday roast and you save the meat till the end, you save the best bits till the end. That's what I'm going to do. I'll save the best bits till the end. But anyway, elves. I like the elves. Got some of the elves sent to me by Paul, and I painted them up pretty much straight away. Now, they have a bunch of noble houses. At the time, I didn't know this, and I was talking to Andy going, oh, I'm painting mine yellow. Is that all right? He's like, yeah, go for it. Cool. I think there's actually a faction. I'm not sure which one it is, but we're going to do one yellow. And I was like, cool, wicked. And looking through the list, there's one called the Golden Sun Kelendia, I think it is, something like that. This is me using my memory now because it's elven names, and me and elven names don't get on. But they look really cool. You've got infantry and cavalry, which kind of feel like late Romans. I don't have any of those yet. I've got an archer, which I painted up. But I did get a bunch of the Marines and the bodyguard. The Marines look quite savage, actually, for elves, because they've got axes, bandanas, look a little bit brutal, look very piratey as well. So I don't want to get on the wrong end of those guys, especially like in a bar brawl in a tavern somewhere down by the docks. You can imagine they get quite rowdy, especially drinking their ancient elven wine, because they can take the drink, can't they, the elves? At least I'm told. But the bodyguard, they look sinister. These guys look real bad. They've got dark elf vibes. I think when you look at them, you're like, they've got, it's the masks, I think, and those glaives make them look really sinister. And from a colour palette point of view, I kind of like the idea of using greens and yellows. I was channeling a little bit of my white run from Skyrim, the guards from Skyrim, but also I'd been watching Rings of Power at the time, and there was the Siege of Eregion, and I just really kind of like, that's why I've gone for like a greeny armour, although it's not that kind of like copper oxidized sort of look that the Eregion elves had in the series. Kind of, I was channeling a little bit of that. I quite like this colour scheme. It's very different. There's two types of yellow. There's kind of like the beige, like warm yellowy beige ochre kind of colour, and then there's an actual yellow thrown in there with some greens. And I thought that might be too much yellow, but it's kind of worked out quite nicely. I'll come to the paint guide later, because I do have a model painted in those colours, so you can check that out if you want to know how to paint those, and same for the orcs as well. But yes, the elves are pretty cool. Big fan of him. So I'm going to move on now to the human kingdoms, they're known as. Now, I wasn't sure what these would look like. So in the art, there's lots of like almost Arthurian era, kind of dark age looking Saxon humans. But I was like, oh, kind of wouldn't mind using some of the new chivalric stuff from Baron's War. And like Paul was like, you can, because, you know, you might as well, because if you play Baron's War, you probably want to use your Baron's War stuff in this game. So it makes sense, because there's lots of kingdoms ruled by a high king. So you can pretty much do what you want with those. So I'm going to use a whole bunch of these and get them painted up. I've got some Baron's War stuff already, which I'm building for Baron's War. So that will be my human faction, whatever I name them or wherever they're from. Doesn't really matter, but you've got choices. You can go for chivalric knights and more Saxony looking dudes, but I imagine they'll get some models at some point, which will pretty much look like the art that you see coming in front of you now. So yeah, very excited, but I do like the idea that it's open as well. Same with the elves and the orcs and the humans. It's open to like interpretation for yourself, because it's called the human kingdoms, the orc tribes. There's no, I mean, the elves have got like the noble houses, but they're just names. So you can put your stamp on that. I've decided mine are the Golden Sun for the elves. So that's why I've gone for yellows and greens. For the humans, I can do what I want. So I really, really like that, having that freedom of choice and freedom of like direction of where I go with my own colour schemes and stuff. When I was looking through the book, I was surprised to see an undead faction. I was like, undead? Oh, this is interesting. Oh, exciting. I like the undead. And it pans out, it's part of the human kingdoms. I was like, oh, that was a surprise. The human kingdoms have got undead. And the idea, I really like this. This particular faction or kingdom very much are believers in the circle of life, death and rebirth. and revere the barrows and the ancient dead kings and warriors of old, and revive them. And the High King kind of probably like turns a blind eye to some weird practices, but is quite pleased when undead warriors turn up to the battlefield to help him out when in times of war and stuff. Imagine Aragorn having the arm of the dead, but every battle, as opposed to just going, oh, I release you from your servant, you can go to sleep now. He's like, no, you're fighting until forever. Because, you know, you're dead. You don't care. You don't tire. So, yes, I'm a big fan of having this kingdom. I think it's the kingdom of Kelnar. Oh, I need to swap up. Let me find out. I do have it written down. I was just winging that. I thought I'll be really clever and wing it. Come on, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Human kingdoms. Cut to Peachy, finding the information out. So much words. Caelan. Found it. The kingdom of Caelan. Yeah. I reckon there'll be like dark, moody tones, maybe blacks and greys, stuff like that. There's a picture of like some witches, which look really cool. I wonder if they're from that faction. I should probably read up on that, but there's a lot of words and, well, you know what I'm like. I get intimidated by words, but they look cool. That's the colour scheme I'd paint them anyway, even if it's not. So, but yeah, I'm going to move on to my love. I like small, stubby things. Very hairy, small, stubby things. Big fan of them. Dwarfs. Talking about dwarfs. I love dwarfs and seeing dwarfs in this. But what I like about these is I look at them and go, cool. Reminds me of Warhammer dwarfs. I like that. Tick. Reminds me of Tolkien dwarfs. Love that. Tick. But also, they kind of remind me of Vikings and Saxons. Love that. Tick. But yeah, it's got everything I want from what I'd expect a dwarf to look like. But there's also some really interesting design aesthetics when I look through some of the art. I was like, that's getting close to like Byzantine, maybe cataphracts and stuff. Maybe they're going to do some dwarfs that look like that. That's quite cool. I quite like that. I don't know if that's fact or anything. I'm just throwing that out by looking at one single piece of art. But I am very keen to see where these go. And I like the scale of them as well, because they do feel like slightly smaller proportions to humans, but they kind of got that look of, they look like a human, but just a bit smaller. But the key thing for me is they look real. They look like they could exist in history. And that is always a win when you like go, I can't tell if they're dwarfs or Vikings. That's good. That's good. Warhost also brings with it a selection of extra rules that you probably wouldn't have experienced if you are gamers or fans of Barons War. So one of those key big changes is going to be magic. Having spellcasters in your forces and obviously chucking spells at the enemy and dispelling spells. So that's also quite cool. I do miss the days of being able to like cast dispel, get my old dispel scroll out. So if you've got activations remaining for like your wizard, you can dispel spells that are coming towards you. You can obviously blow people's faces off with arcane bolts and fireballs. We also get something called a timeless spell, which once it's cast, it just hangs around until it's dispelled. So you have to obviously put some legwork in to get rid of it. And it could probably be quite devastating. It kind of reminds me a little bit like the endless spells for Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, whatever you want to call it. So yes, you have normal spells where you just like bolt someone, or you can have like these things hanging around, which can be quite irritating to your game. You also get monsters, which is pretty cool as well. So if you have orcs, you get like trolls. If you like the elves, you get air elementals. These bring a whole extra dynamic to the game, because in the brackets you'll see they'll have like a number, and like the troll says 4. In a single round of combat, you need to cause 4 wounds on it to kill it. That might sound really easy. It's not easy at all, because you might only have like 3 guys in your group of warriors. So that's gonna be quite tricky to do. So I kind of like the idea that it is hard to bring these things down, and that's obviously a successful wound. So there's obviously all the hitting to get through. So big fan of like having big sturdy beasts that take a little bit of taken down, which is what you want from like your trolls. And also the X also counts as like, if you're taking objectives, how many warriors it kind of counts as well. I believe that's right. Andy, jump in the comments if I'm all wrong, because you know, rules and all that. Peachy, I just play for fun. But regardless, really cool little changes there. And also you get some tweaks to commanders as well. One of the things I do like about the commanders in the rules as well is you can have different effects depending on where you are in the combat. So if you're in base-to-base contact, then obviously you're windmilling in with your sword and like hacking away. But if you're a little bit further away, then you can support and do other stuff. So I kind of like that. It's almost like you've got a dual role depending on where you are situated when a fight occurs. But yes, lots of little changes. If you are familiar with Barons War, there's probably a little teeny tiny bit of reading up to do. If you're new to it, then it's just the same amount of reading you'd have for any kind of new game, really. You do need Barons War, the rule book, obviously, to use this rule system. So that's something I need to make sure I'm clear about. It does say that in the rule book anyway, but yes, it is a supplement to Barons War, but it uses the same mechanics and rules as Barons War. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to painting some miniatures, because I like painting miniatures. I like throwing that in. I'm going to do some orcs first. Now, in this guide, I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to use the new John Blanche paints. There's 2 sets, Volume 1, Volume 2. I'm going to use both of those. Reason being is these orcs remind me of orcs from the late 80s, early 90s. The colours also remind me of colours used to paint said orcs from the early 90s and late 80s. So that is why I'm going to use them. I'm going to chuck in some extra colours like a flesh and a light silver for like a little bit of punch here and there. But that is the reason why I want to do that, is I want the orcs to look old school. Now, one thing I do in this guide as well is I will undercoat 3 different models, 3 different colours. And the reason for that, the first one, I'm going to undercoat black in case people don't have access to a multitude of colours like I do, or an airbrush like a lot of people might do. So black is a nice standard way of starting off with a miniature, so I've got that covered. But I also spray one silver because the majority of that model is metal, like armour and helmet and weapons, so you'll probably get a few orcs or warriors that might have that, so it makes sense to kind of spray him silver because there's only a little bit of cloth here and there. But there's also another one that's mostly cloth with a little bit of armour. Now my colour scheme is going to be red, so it makes sense for me to spray this guy red, but if you were doing like green orcs or brown orcs or something else, then you'd probably spray it with a relevant colour, or just go with the black version, which I do at the start. But after the first couple of colours, like the silvers and the reds, once you get past that, it's pretty much the same colour for every model. But I just show all the imagery anyway of each of them being painted because it's fun and I did it, and you want to see what the models look like painted. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to paint an orc, or 3 orcs, from 3 different undercoats. So let's get cracking and do some painting.
Now the first thing we want to do is get some metal onto our palette, and then I'm going to get myself a dry brush and then load that up. And like with any good old dry brushing, we're trying to remove as much of that pigment as we possibly can off the bristles, so using tissue paper or whatever. And then it's just a matter of gently dry brushing this over the surface area. So I'm aiming for the metal areas, so that's the chainmail, the plate mail, the weapons. Don't want too much pressure on here, just a nice little tickle over that, and as you can see, it's picking out those raised details. You can put a bit more pressure on things like the helmet and the breastplate if you want, but yeah, just take your time and work your way around picking out those details. For our red undercoated guy, what we're going to do here is we're going to get some of that same metal, but we're going to base coat that instead on those areas we want metal. So you can thin it down slightly. I've just used a little bit of water here. It just means it just flows nice and easy into those recesses when you're applying it. And you can always do a second coat if you need to. But yeah, just go around, find all those areas you want to be metal. So whether that's weapons, maybe like the odd like hilt of a weapon as well, or if there's like any little daggers and stuff hanging around, just have a little check around. Now if you have any models that are completely coated in armor and you've sprayed them silver, what you want to do here is turn some of those cloth areas into your desired cloth color. Here I'm using red, so what I'm going to do now is get some of that blanched berry and then start picking out any areas I want cloth. You will notice as well there is a big gaping hole on the back of this guy. I didn't realise there's a back banner. I can't find the back banner, so we'll just have to pretend he has a back banner. He's just left it at base. But yeah, just anything you want red cloth, just work your way around and get that picked out. Now for the guy with undercoated black and dry brush silver, we're going to basically do the same thing here. So we're just going to look for any areas we want cloth. Again, it could be some brown, some red. I want to keep it all red because I quite like the idea of having that red cloth, big long red tunic for this dude underneath his mail shirt. So yeah, just work my way around to get those areas base coated. And this guy has a cowl, so I thought, you know what, he's got like a slightly lighter red undercoat. I used Reliquary Red from Colourforge for that. So what I'm going to do for the cowl, any areas as well where I may have like messed it with a bit of silver, I can just base coat over with that. Now what we're going to do is move on to picking out all the other colours we want to pick out. So here I'm going to go for some greys. So that's things like trousers, the odd sleeve, just to break up the shape a bit more because you don't want it to be too much of a shapeless mass of red. So that's on all the models. So this guy's got some little hose trousers. So I'm just going to pick those out with grey as well. What I didn't realise when I was painting this guy is he's one of the special characters called Gromgar the Marauder. So yeah, a little bit of a preview to this back bannerless dude. But hey, he looks great. Now we're going to move on to picking out any brown details. This I'm going to use for like both the wood and the leather to start off with, and then I might change my mind depending on what areas I want slightly different for straps or bandages or wraps or anything like that. So initially I just started painting the wraps and the leather bits, then I was like, no, actually let's do the whole weapon. So that's sometimes like a decision when you're painting, you just change your mind as you're going along. But yeah, anything I want like leather initially just helps break the shape up, and then I can go from there if I do want to change my mind or whatever. Now some of these have like straps in some funny places. Sometimes you might not notice as well. It was with a couple of the models in the guide I did discover later on that, oh, it's got some straps there or whatever. But yeah, it's the same process really for any version of how I've started these, whether that's like black undercoat, red undercoat, silver undercoat. We're at the same point now where we're just going to be picking out those same details. They're not overly laden with detail, which is perfect, and that's what I want from my orcs. I want some detail, but not too much, and this is the perfect balance for me. Now, I wanted some lighter colours for the wraps. Again, I'm using all the John Blanche paint, so the colour I found was Sunburst Ochre. So I'm just going to coat that all over like the leg wrappings, arm wrappings, maybe some straps on the weapons as well. But again, it's just helping break up the shape a little bit more. You could do it like a different colour if you wanted to. You could do like bone colours, you could do it like greys or lighter greys. I just wanted to make sure I used all the colours. Oh yes, there was a random bit of resin I missed there, so yeah, bit of tidy up there. Then it's on to the skin, and that Tainted Garden just felt like a really nice sort of like, well, orc green skin, not like your usual Citadel orc green skins. I wanted something a little bit more natural. I wanted something a little bit more natural looking, so that's why I went for Tainted Garden, and obviously it's in the set, so there was another green, but I opted for this one. I thought it looked mega, looked fleshy, looked organic. So yeah, just go around picking out the hands, the faces. Again, if you make any mistakes during this process, you can always tidy back up those previous colours. So if you get like some flesh on the silvers or whatever, I mean, that's the beauty of painting. If you make a mistake, you can just paint over it. It's great. And in some places I did need to do a second coat as well, and I did forget about this guy's strap, so I thought I'd quickly pick that out because I don't know anyone else. Oh yeah, and the melt bit at the back, forgot about that too. Poor guy getting left out. Is there anything that looks a little bit sort of humanoid that's been severed and chopped off? I thought I'd go for some Paratrooper tan. So that's what I'm using here. It's not a John Blanche paint, but I wanted a slightly lighter flesh tone to use for those details. Now, Gromgar has all these little round metal plates sewn into his chainmail, so I thought, you know what, just to break the shape up a little bit. Again, it's about making things stand out. Sometimes when you've got lots of the same colour around, so I'm just going to go around all those little roundel bits and pick them out with Emperor Gold. And as you can see here, did forget about his straps. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to happen. Sometimes you just don't notice it. So I'm just picking out those now. Now, anything that's bone, I'm going to get some of that ivory white. It's quite bright, but you know what? It's the John Blanche paints. It's going to get coated in some grimy looking washes, so it's fine. There's a couple around here and there. Check Gromgar out. He's got a baby skull. Wow, what a hero. You're a brave man, Gromgar. Then it's my favourite part, which is just to coat the entire models in a shade. So I'm using Grimdark Shadow here. It is a mix almost of like a greeny black kind of tone, which I really, really like because it kind of gives it like a bit of an oily, greasy kind of look to it. So perfect for all the colours on these models. So shade all those reds, silvers, greys, but also the skin as well. So I'm just going to go quite heavily over that, work my way around. Now do be mindful when you are shading to check for pooling, because sometimes things pool in awkward places. So if you do see that, just dry off your brush, soak that little bit off, and then carry on with your life. But so far, really chuffed with how these have come out. And once you've painted them, and once this is dry, you could leave your models at that, and they could be battle ready, get them based, and then start smashing some elves in the face with your maces. Once they're dry, one option for highlighting is to do an all-over dry brush. And that's something I like doing when I'm doing lots of rank and file. If you're doing loads of these guys, it will definitely speed up the process. So I'm just getting Tainted Garden, and I'm just going to gently dry brush that over everything. So that's the grey, the red. Yes, I'm going to get on some of the silver, but it will just make it look a little bit mucky. It's good for the skin as well. But it just ties all the colours together. It's a really quick and dirty way of highlighting models fast without having to like sit forever edge highlighting stuff. But you know, it's different horses for different courses, so it's entirely up to you which approach you take. But I thought I'd share this quick army painting method. Sometimes when you do this kind of stuff, you might just want to go back over and tidy up a little bit. So I'm just going over that face and hands with Tainted Garden again. And where that dry brushing may have been a bit too extreme on some of like the reds, where it's just got rid of the red entirely, you can just go back over and just tidy up a little bit here and there. But again, that's like nothing major. You don't even have to do this step. This is just something I wanted to do to add a little bit more of that Blanche berry into the red, because I was a bit heavy on my dry brushing on this guy. And you could do that with the greys as well if you wanted to. But you can also go down the highlighting route instead of doing an all-over dry brush. So I'm just going to get some fiery vermilion. It's quite a bright red. I'm just going to pick out some of those raised areas on the cloth, just where the light's touching. I'm not going to go too mad. Just work your way around. You could just do little bits here and there. You could do the whole lot. You could like pick out every edge if you really wanted to, but I'm just being selective. Again, it's a speed thing as well. You know, you can just pick what you see, because if you did edge highlight everything, you might not see it all, especially when it's on the tabletop. Depends on the level you're after. But the other thing I'm going to do with fiery vermilion is pick out the eyes of it. I thought orcs with big glowing red eyes look cool. Now I'm probably well aware that Paul had sculpted like eyelids here, but I'm just being a little bit naughty and picking the whole area out, so it just looks like a big old eye glaring around. But yeah, sometimes when you are applying this, you will smudge or get a little bit, so just dry off your brush, move that paint off, or if you can't, just get the colour that you're using for the skin and just tidy up around it. It happens all the time when you're painting eyes. Now, using that ivory white, I could pick out the teeth as well. Again, this is not something you have to do, but I thought it'd be quite nice just to add a little bit of interest to those faces, help you draw your eyes in a little bit, makes them look really manky as well. Also, when you're highlighting or tidying up, you can just go back over with some of those metallics as well, just add a little bit more punch or bling to the colour, because sometimes the shades can make them really super dull and you might want the light to catch it and make it look a little bit shiny. So that's what I'm just doing here, just getting some of that heavy metal slightly thinned down and just reapplying it over just some of the areas that look well, I want to be a little bit shinier. Again, where the light's going to naturally touch it as well. So usually the helmets, top parts of the breastplates, that kind of thing. Also, something I like to do is pick out individual bits of scale mail as well, just here and there, so it looks like it's like catching the light in the sun. Then I'm going to get some grim black, and what I'm going to do with this is just pick out any areas that are like hair and stuff, or some deeper recesses that might need a little bit more help, because like maybe the brown and the black there just isn't enough of a bridge between the two. Again, that's just something that I like to do. A bit of fine lining, deep recess shades, what you want to call them. Again, this is one of those little steps that just helps break up some of the shapes a bit. You can run it into like mouths to add a bit more depth there as well. Now, there's a really cool colour called Grim Rust. I'm going to apply that. There are other rusts available that I use from Army Painter as well. There's like Dark Rust and Light Rust. But seeing as I'm using just the John Blanche paints for these guys, I'm going for the Grim Rust. It's quite grim and horrible looking, hence the name, I guess. But it kind of looks a little bit like baby poo. And I don't mind that. It's a very orky looking thing. So what I'm doing here is just going over all those chainmail bits, going in all the cracks and recesses, and just making it look not very nice. I mean, the armour they're not going to look after. It's going to get a bit manky. It's going to be all sorts of horrible residues and like juices on these guys from all manner of things. So and it adds a little bit more warmth as well to the overall look, because it's a bit yellowier in comparison to those quite cold looking colours. So yeah, I'm just going to town, just applying that. Again, you can thin it down more. You can drop some onto your actual scale mail, then add some water after. That's something I like to do. That's what I'm doing here. So I've applied it quite neat, and then I've just got some water on my brush, and I'm just applying that actually over the scale mail, and that just helps it run into those cracks a bit more as well. But yeah, there's no right or wrong way. Sometimes I suppose you can over-weather, but just have fun, and that's what I'm doing here. Having lots of fun, making it look a little bit, well, manky. But yeah, as you can see, just adding some water there as well, just getting some of those recesses to make it a little bit more flowy into the chainmail. I wonder what happened to his back banner. I'll have to have a look for it. Maybe I didn't get one. Then I'm going to get some Voodoo Shade. Now that's kind of like a lighter kind of tone to the Grim Dark. It's got a bit more of a yellowiness to it as well. So I'm going to apply that over the armour, just for some extra tone and a nice little extra hue in there as well. Again, I'm keeping it to the armour mostly. But it just helps work with that Grim Rust as well. And some places it'll be a little bit dark in the recesses. But it's just an excuse to use all the colours, really. We also have a colour called Warm Skin Tone, which is obviously designed to go over skin, but it's kind of got a rustiness to it, a bit more of an orangey rustiness to it. So I thought I'd apply that to the weapons, but I also thought it was quite nice on some of the deeper recesses of the skin, add a little bit of warmth to the skin as well. Because they are green skins, but kind of want to make them look a little bit more organic and realistic looking. Realistic orcs. Of course, that's the thing. But yeah, just go around, apply some of that warm skin tone to make things look rusty and battered and weathered. I don't know if I went over the top here or not. I don't think I did. Now, with those areas dry, what I'm going to do, certainly for like this guy, is just get a little bit of plate mail. So this isn't a paint from the John Blanche set. This is just an extra silver I wanted to use, just to add, like I say, a little bit of a highlight to some of those silver areas. And I'm just gently just dry brushing around here and there. Alternatively, you could just do an edge highlight on some of the areas where the light's going to catch, like I'm doing on Grongor here. But that's entirely up to you how you want to go about doing it. Sometimes mix up both. A little bit of dry brush on the chainmail and a little bit of edge highlight on plate mail. I do like to mix it up, actually. It breaks it up and makes it look visually interesting as well. So I do like to do that. It's also an opportunity to add little scratches or dents, or just emphasise things like rivets and stuff if you feel that they could do with it. Or like the crests on the helmets and stuff. Now, for those severed head and hand bits and stuff like that, I thought it needs a bit of blood. And you've got something called Blood Moon Red. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to apply that all over. Now, it won't dry shiny, and I'm fine with that because I want it to look a little bit dry. Then I thought to myself, actually, yeah, the blood will probably drip down his tunic a bit, so I'll stain that area as well. Not sure how readable that will be on that dark red, but I thought I'd apply it anyway. I know it's there, and I know it's dribbled and stained the red. Maybe that used to be white cloth, and he's killed lots of guys. Also, when using the Blood Moon, I thought it'd be quite nice to pick out the lips. Again, that helps make it look more like an organic creature. Got that kind of like warmth to the face a little bit. You can add it to the nose if you really wanted to, or around the eyelids, at the bottom of the eyelids. But it's a nice little way of adding a little bit of interest to the face. And again, you could apply it to some of the weapons to make them look a little bit gory. Alternatively, get some of the actual True Blood or Dry Blood paints from Army Painter or anywhere else.
Now, I'm normally a big fan of professional looking soldiers and smart looking uniforms, but I thoroughly enjoyed painting those orcs, especially adding all that grime and dirt to them. Now, that's something you don't have to do. I do leave them at a certain point to basically go, you can just leave them at that. But if you do want to add that grime, I mean, there's other rusts available as well from different companies, but also Army Painter do like light rust and dark rust. So if you wanted something that's not as yellowy, I just quite like the look of that colour. It was different and new. And I wanted to use something different and new, and it just made them look really grimy, especially those extra washes, the grim dark, the voodoo shade, and that warm flesh tone as well. Very nice. So what I'm going to do now is move on to an elf. Now, I painted my elves with a yellow theme, like I mentioned before, with some green flashes on that. So I'm going to basically do that on this mounted wizard. Now, I hate painting the horses. I hate it. Bugbear of mine. But what I'm going to do is do a really quick way of painting a horse. I might do some extra level bits if you really want to. But my horses tend to be what I refer to as the frame of the picture. The picture being the rider, the horse being the frame. So I don't want the horse to be like overbearing. So it tends to be brown with like black horse furniture, like saddle and reins and stuff like that. Harness, horse harness, the saddle gear, stirrups, the straps. You know what I mean? Anyway, I hate painting horses, so I'm going to do that first, get that out of the way, and then I'm going to paint up a wizard, a mage, a mounted mage.
So the first thing I'm going to do is get Banshee Brown and I'm going to do a heavy dry brush over the horse. Now, if you're starting with a brown coat like I'm doing here, it gives it a nice subtle transition. But if you don't and you have black, then just do a heavier dry brush. And that can be your first colour. So just work your way around. Do like a big old heavy dry brush like I'm doing here. Now for a little bit of a lighter tone, I've got some of that Ruddy Terror and I'm just going to do a lighter dry brush. So initially I just dry brushed it all over the horse quite lightly and softly, not putting too much pressure on. Now it's good for picking out all the muscles and stuff, but what you can do, which is what I'm doing here, is just stipple it on. So don't rub as much off and then just stab with your brush. And this is kind of like a stippling effect. You don't have to, I mean, I'm not doing a proper full-on stipple. It's more of a rudimentary one, but it's just helping picking out some of those areas. Again, you can be as heavy, as light as you want. It depends on how light you want your horse. Another option as well is once you've done that, just to make it a little bit less rough in places, is get some of the colour you just stippled on, thin it down slightly, and then just pick out some of those raised areas of the actual muscles as well. This is an extra step I wouldn't normally do. I'll just do a couple of dry brushes and leave it at that. And then the really quick and easy part is to get like a thin black, or like I've got here, grim black, and then just apply that all over the hair and the reins and the saddle, basically everything that isn't horse skin. Of course the hooves as well, can't forget the hooves. So that's what I'm doing here, is just going around picking out all those straps and hair. It's the same colour, I know, but like I said, it's the frame of the actual rider for me. And if you're doing like loads of these, it's such a quick and simple way of doing it. Of course, don't forget the tail. Now sometimes I like to draw a little bit of attention to the eyes, so I tend to pick out the eyes a little bit. It gives you something to focus on, you know, a little bit of camouflage if you like, to hide all that really rough dry brushing. So just pick out the eyes with a bit of white, maybe the muzzle with a little bit of flesh. Entirely up to you. For the eyes I like to do a little black dot as well. Probably went a bit too wide there so you can't see the whites of the eyes, but it doesn't matter. This guy's also got a little bit of armoured barding on the front, so I'm just going to use some tainted gold, which is the same gold I used when I was doing like highlights of certain areas on the yellow elves. So that'll tighten nicely with those. There was a different kind of green for some of the armour, but I'm just keeping it to tainted gold for this. It's just a nice gold. Again, take your time, have some fun, and once you've done that, you can leave your horse like that. Don't have to get mad. Or if you wanted to, you could do some highlighting on the muscles if you really felt the need, especially if it's a character or something like that. Just go around picking out the odd little bit, again where the light catches, or areas like near the top of it, sometimes underneath, and areas that are a bit awkward to get to your brush. I don't tend to highlight because you're not going to see it because it's awkward to get to. But yeah, just add a little bit of lightness, make it more of a chestnut, bay. No, not bay, probably chestnut. I don't know my horse colours. They're just brown four-legged things for my warriors to go on. Now my mage, I'm going to start from a yellow undercoat. However, just to make sure, in case I'm making mistakes, I'm just going to coat over some fiendish yellow for the robe itself as well. It's a lot easier when picking out yellows, starting with a yellow undercoat. Now for a slightly more muted or desaturated yellow, I'm using something called Wasteland Clay. So it's more of a ochre beige kind of colour. So I'm just working my way around now, picking that on the sleeves. On some of the other models, there was like more of a tunic hanging down and from underneath the armour or whatever. So if you have that, you can do that as well. But I'm just picking the sleeves out here. And then any areas I think are going to be leather, I'm just going to coat with Brigadine Brown. Again, just work your way around, picking out all the areas you need. I know eventually those saddle straps will probably become black. Initially, I did paint all the horse furniture, like the saddle, brown here as well. I know they're going to be black in a bit to match the saddle. But actually later on I changed my mind and turned it to green. But I'm just picking out brown for the moment. Just gets it done. Also helps break up what's going to be yellow or what's going to be cloth and what's not. And again, if you make mistakes like I just did there, you can always tidy back up because, like I said, the beauty of painting, if you make mistakes, you tidy back up. Just get some of that fiendish yellow. The yellows are really quite punchy as well, so I just need a little bit here and there. I don't even need 2 coats, just 1 coat where I got that brown on by accident. Now, he has got a little bit of green showing, so that's just a little bit of leg. He's got a little bit of leg showing, a little bit of green trousers, so I'll pick that out. Probably won't see it when he's on the horse. The hair, I'm going to go for Tundra Taupe. I do like Tundra Taupe. It's somewhere between like a green and a beige kind of colour, but look really nice as like a hair tone, like a nice mousy hair tone. So I'm just going to go around again, do a couple of coats if you need to. Using that tainted gold for any metal parts or metal clasps and hilts on knives and things. So I'm just going to go around picking that out. Sometimes when you're painting, it can be a little journey of discovery and you're like, oh, you know what, I'm going to pick that out as silver or whatever. And as soon as I've used it already for the face, I'm going to use some Paratrooper Tan as well. In fact, that's probably what I use when I paint the other elves. Get his hands coated. Again, you might, because of the yellow, you might want to do a second coat, but to be honest, most of the Fanatic paints cover really well, even when I've thinned them down a little bit. Just 1 coat, perfect for beginners and experts alike. Now this crystal on the staff, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to go with it. Maybe make it like a blue glowy thing. So I'm going to do now to start off with is just base coat. I'm using Brigade Grey because it's like an off-white and covers really well. So I'm just going to base coat that, do a couple of coats. Also got a random feather. Maybe it's a dove's feather. Don't know. I'm going to paint it white anyway. Not quite sure what I'm going to do with it. Now I'm going to do a keyline. Now on some of my characters I've got this red keyline that goes all the way around them. So I'm going to do that now. This is one of those things that is an extra added detail that you don't feel that you have to do. It's just something I like to do. So when I'm doing these key lines and stripes or whatever, I use the very base of the robe, so the yellow that's there and the red stripe, and use that as kind of like how I'm judging the thickness of it. So as long as that yellow below it is around about the same distance from the base of the robe, that kind of gives me an idea. And the thickness tends to be the stroke of the actual brush itself. You can always make it thicker if you need to. But I'm just literally working my way around, keeping it to the same distance that I've kept, well, all the way through, really. Can be quite tricky. I did struggle to get this in focus at times as well, so I do apologise if it does get a little bit blurry. Always seems to be the case when I'm doing fine detail work. And also I thought I'd carry on that red up his tunic as well, so it almost goes around like almost to the collar or the very top of his neck. Again, trying to keep a similar distance, or at least a similar thickness here. Because it's the torso, you could be a little bit different if you need to. Then if you need to broaden out or correct or whatever, that's the next bit. This is all done during the base coat stage as well, so if I do make mistakes, really easy to correct. I've not got a shade on there to account for. So if there's some areas that are a little bit thicker than others, perfect. I can just get that fiendish yellow, tidy up, correct those mistakes, especially if like one line's gone a bit wibbly wobbly. Best part, really. Now what I'm going to do is just be really cocky and just make like a little pattern on that key line. So I'm just going to almost do like a couple of right angles here on the corners, as if like it's like a border or a corner, a little bit of corner detail. And then I'm just going to do lots of little angled stripes. I did this on the pirate guys, and I thought I'd just continue this pattern. I'm not really thinking about the distance here, I'm just doing a couple of brush strokes. Again, if you make mistakes, just go back over with a little bit of red and start again. Sometimes when you are doing these angled lines, they end up being more horizontal by accident, but it's fine. It's just a matter of making sure they're angling in the right direction. I guess they're like chevrons, I suppose. I thought I'd just drop a little dot in that corner. Little shaky hands there. Peachy shaky hands. It's because I wasn't breathing properly. Now, I wanted to do a little pattern. Now, when I was looking at the magic, the elves have something called life magic, but it has like a little fiery design on a little red circle. No, that's just a piece of art for the actual magic itself, the game rules. But I quite like that design. So I'm going to copy that. So I thought I'd do it on the back. Now, I also decided to do it on the front of the tunic as well. I am not going to paint a little flame design at the front of the tunic. I'm just going to do 2 little red dots and then maybe put like a little yellow dot in the middle of it. Just make it like a little bit of a patterned design. Honestly, I don't know what I was thinking when I was doing this. I was just playing around with colour. Now, I did 3 little wiggly strokes here to try and get like a flame design that looks like the actual flame pattern. Now, when you are doing these things, there is an element of artistic license. So I'm trying to make it look a little bit like that flame design, but it's a really, really small detail. So I kind of having to fudge it a little bit. And I guess the end result really is, it's okay, it's workable. It doesn't look like a flame design, but from a distance, it's like, oh, it's got a cool pattern. Because all my horse furniture or straps or whatever are black, I thought, yep, you know what, don't forget, make all those bits, certainly the stirrups, the straps on the stirrups, they need to be black peach. So I thought I'd quickly do that. Also quickly cheekily picked out his eyes as well. Then I'm going to coat my entire elf mage in strong tone. This is just so it matches in with the elves I've done previously, the yellow elves. So the colours here aren't the same as the ones I used for the orcs. I'm not using all the John Blanche ones. I'm using a few for sure. But yeah, just working my way around, applying that strong tone to tie him in with the other guys. And then it'll just be tidy up after, a little bit of tidy up central. And that's something that I always find quite key after I've done like a shade and all over shade, is get that previous colour that I've base coated with like I'm doing here, and then just pick out some of the raised areas. It gives you that extra level of highlight as well in places. And sometimes when you are doing shades, they can be quite blotchy, or where it's like pooled, it could be a bit awkward. I'm also using that same colour to highlight the yellow as well on the tunic, because it's like a slightly lighter, creamier yellow. I thought that'd be quite nice as a highlight for the yellow. So I'm just going to go around and just pick out the odd little fold here and there on his yellow tunic. Not going to go too mad. Sometimes it can be a little bit lighter when you're doing highlights, but I'll come to that in a moment. Then I'll use some Baron June, which is a little bit lighter, and that can just highlight that slightly yellowy ochre creamy colour. Now for the highlights I've done on the tunic using that wasteland clay, I'm just going to make a little glaze. All done there really is just thin down a little bit of the Fiendish yellow, and I'm just applying that over the yellow areas where those highlights are, and I'll just knock them back a little bit so they'll still look like a highlight, but they won't be as creamy. They'll still look like a yellow highlight, and that's a really good way of fixing a highlight if it's too bright. Then for any leather details, I'm just going to get some leather brown and like things like pouches, maybe the odd highlight here and there, like things like the staff or whatever. It's entirely to you. I did a base coat originally, and then I had a little bit of water, so it was a little bit lighter. So actually I thinned it down on the actual haft of the weapon itself, which gave it a little bit of a different finish to the actual leather pouch. And then the boots themselves, I just edge highlighted those, again making it look a little bit different from the pouch. So the pouch is more of a leathery brown, this is more of a dark brown with a brown highlight, so you can just from one colour get some differences on how you apply it. Then I thought to myself that I need a bit more green on the model to tie in with the rest of the guys, so I'm going to pick out that saddle green. That makes a lot of sense. So all I did was got some camouflage green and decided to base coat that actual saddle he sat on, which then made sense to then do that on the horse to tie it in with him. So yes, it's an extra detail on the horse, but it will look nice as an end result. Really help tie it in with the rest of the elves that I've done, because they've got a little bit more green on them. I thought I'd just do one of the straps green as well, just the one. And then use a slightly lighter colour to highlight it just at the very top. So this is olive drab. It is the next tone up from camouflage green. So that's all I'm doing there, just picking out some edges, just being a little bit rough, doing the odd little jaggedy highlight there. If I want my leather to look a little bit tatty, maybe. I mean, he's an elf, does he have tatty leather? Don't know. He's in battle, of course he's going to have tatty leather. And then I'm just going to highlight the skin using some amber skin here, so it's slightly lighter than the paratrooper tan. Again, just picking out those extremities, nose, cheeks, brows, knuckles, that kind of stuff. Not going too mad. And then for the staff, I was having a little bit of a rummage. I wanted like a light kind of tone, so I've got this thing called pastel seafoam. I thought, oh, cool, I'm going to use that. And then it's just a matter of sticking a little bit of super glue on my rider and then attaching him to the horse. And there we are. Got him all done, all glued on.
There we are. Our mage on horseback is done. I'm quite pleased with him. Put a little bit more effort into the horse than I probably normally would do. Mostly brown with black straps and hair, but adding that green for the saddle and some of the extra straps and stuff kind of made sense, really. Tied it in with the rest of the range because there wasn't enough green on the actual mage himself, because you couldn't see much of his trousers. And also I like to use this thing called Dark Emerald for the armour, and the mage didn't really have enough armour on him. He had some other metal bits, but not the kind of dark greeny dirty armour I do. But yeah, I really enjoyed painting this dude. Now, I had some issues when I was filming, and one of those issues was I did this whole section where I talked to camera twice, and it got corrupted because the first time I didn't press record on my OBS, and the second time I got corrupted. What did that do, Peach? Well, it meant I had to do it all again, which is fine. It's fine. I'm used to this, but it kind of deleted the human I painted. So I put a picture up now. I put a picture up of him, and I want you in the comments to work out how I painted him, because there's no paint guide. That is your mission for today. You're like, Peachy, you clearly use these colours. It's all Army Painting Range, so I'll make it easy for you. If you don't know the Army Painting Range, then just guess with like Citadel or whatever you use. But yeah, I want you in the comments, if you're up for a game, work out how I painted him. That's a bit of fun, isn't it? Yeah. Oh well, he's done, you know, but sorry I couldn't get that. Just corrupted. It's just, never had that before, but it's part and parcel apparently. Anyway, yes. Really enjoyed this. Hope you got something useful out of it, whether that's like quick ways of painting orcs or just enjoyed listening to a new game that's coming out. I do that a lot. I talk about new games, but I like talking about new games because there's lots of games, and I'm going to probably do that for the foreseeable, as well as play some fun battle reports and paint some cool models. So if Warhost does indeed float your boat, then do check out Hobday&Hicks. They're going to be kicking things off with a comprehensive range of elves and orcs, with dwarves soon to follow. The website should be live as of when this video goes live, and I'll drop a link in the description as well. So do consider checking that out. I also have an affiliate link for War Games Atlantic, and they also stock the plastic chivalric era Barons War stuff there as well. Now, using the affiliate link doesn't cost you any extra, just means I get a little bit of kickback from it. So if you are considering getting into plastics, do consider using the affiliate link. Obviously you don't have to, you can do whatever you want, it's entirely up to you. Massive thank you to these beautiful majestic people going by. They're such beautiful people. In fact, I think I've accrued enough patrons now in the Peachy Tips channel to maybe start our own kingdom. I think we should start our own kingdom, patrons. What would we call it though? What would we call it? Maybe the Kingdom of Tea? No, not quite right. Peach, the Lords of Peachville. We can call it Peachville. No, that's a bit too self-indulgent. Don't like that. The Chosen Bastards. No. The Knights of the Teabagged Tape. No, I'm giving up. No, come up with some names, patrons. I mean, if you're not a patron, you can come up with names as well. I don't care. Anyway, waffled on enough. Love you all. Do consider having a go at Warhost. Barons War's mega. Love fantasy. Love generic fantasy. Love everything about fantasy. Right, I'm off. I'm off to, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe plan out the Battle Report 2. Well, I've already planned it out. I know what's happening. I've got some great ideas for it. Oh my days. You are going to be in for a surprise. Do I give any of it away? I mean, do I mention that maybe Airwolf might turn up? That's a bit too much, Peachy. Maybe, you know, something about the Matrix, but not like, you know, Neo the Matrix. Something about John Matrix. Maybe he might turn up. Then someone mentioned, it'd be really good to get the 80s Battlestar Galactica people. Anyway, I'm talking too much. If you did hear that in the background, that is Charlie screaming as one of the sailors from James Bond whilst he's playing with his toy set. If you wondered, if you were like, what was that noise? There we are. Anyway, bye.